Often when people hear the word photojournalist, they think of photographers who go to war zones and photographers who go to foreign countries and to photograph foreign lands. But I personally think there's a story in everyone's backyard. Things that happen in this laneway where we're sitting right now. I think if a photographer feels like they can only photograph overseas, in my opinion, they're being a bit lazy, because if you can't photograph in your own backyard, you can't photograph anywhere. When I first started in photography, I used to photograph a lot of single images, random images, an image here or a photograph here. And over time, I found that what I really enjoyed was doing longer-term projects over a period of time. When I was living in the US, a lot of those projects were very close, very intimate photo essays, almost living with a family, living with groups of people, and becoming part of that community, part of that scene, and photographing from within.
I'm committed to documenting contemporary Australian life.
That's your car?
That's, I feel, is more important than travelling abroad and documenting other places. I tend to document not the broader scope of life, but more small, particular, interesting, things that I find interesting, parts of life, how people live, how people act. For me, as an Australian, I think there has been a lack of documenting Australia. There's been a cultural cringe that maybe there's not enough here to document.
It's good. Cool. And again?
I'm really fascinated by how other people live out of my own little world that I grew up in. I've always been fascinated with that when I've travelled, and even when I worked in the suburban newspapers in Sydney, because I'd be travelling to suburbs that I'd never been, that I hadn't grown up in, and so sometimes it was like being overseas, being in these suburbs.
A lot of my work is dealing with social issues, and my initial encounter with the block, I spent 3-4 weeks down there without taking a picture. I'd treat it as though I was there in a social engagement. I'd be just hanging out with people, and if they're just sitting around, sitting around and having a drink or having a smoke, I'd be doing the same thing. You get to learn about people and get to understand them and befriend them that way. I want them to know that I wasn't just there to run in there, take some photos and run back out again.
A lot of the work that I do, my own personal work, often runs in parallel with my life. So I've just had children, and this is a friend of mine who also has just had children, and so I sort of have an understanding of the rhythm of being around someone with young kids.
I was going through what all women in their 30s were going through, which was the biological clock ticking, and everywhere I went, I'd see 50 baby strollers coming at me from every single direction. And so in order to deal with that overwhelming feeling, I took my camera out and actually started photographing. And this was the very first frame I took.
I like the idea of storytelling, where you can immerse yourself in either a culture or some part of society. I've worked on things like stories like pigeon racing, the rockabilly sort of scene. And because it takes a longer time to complete the stories, they are over a longer term. There's a lot more photographs, but at times I find I've got to stop, take a step back and have a look at what I've done and find out what I'm missing. It's almost like a book, what the chapters are that I'm missing to link these photographs.
Actually, photography in Australia is incredibly healthy. There are so many wonderful photographers, each, with their own perspective on the world, each photographing and immortalising certain things.
In the last 15, 20 years, the Australian photography has become incredibly strong and is being recognised around the world and has got a very fresh look to it. So I think I'm in a great place to be inspired and gain knowledge from those around me in such a situation.
Back in the year 2000, there were several Australian photographers who came together to form a new collective called Oculi, and I was one of the founding members. The group came together for several different reasons, but the main reason was we were all working on long-term projects. We were all shooting real pictures, not set up, nothing art directed, nothing contrived, nothing staged, all real moments in real life. And we couldn't find any outlets for our work.
We came together, a group of us, and decided we'd create a platform to, ratchet Australian photography up a bit and deliver it to the rest of the world, to show them what we were doing here and that our brand of photography was at standards with the rest of the world.